Welcome, everybody. Good morning. The joy of Easter to you all. He is risen. Welcome to the Catholic University of America, and welcome to those of you who are watching our live stream online. I apologize for the slight delay, but we're glad that you're here with us now. My name is Stephen White. I'm the Executive Director of the Catholic Project here at the Catholic University of America. The Catholic Project is a new initiative begun by President John Garvey designed to lead, coordinate, and facilitate the university's response to the ongoing crisis in the Church. Catholic University occupies a unique place in the American Catholic landscape and has at its disposal an array of resources and faculties from the School of Canon Law to the National Catholic School of Social Service, from the School of Theological and Religious Studies to the Bush School of Business and the Columbus School of Law. Catholic University is particularly well suited to play a leading role in addressing faithfully and unflinchingly the challenges we face as a church today. Today's gathering marks the fourth in our series of conferences on healing the breach of trust. Past conferences have included theological and historical reflections on the role of the laity in the church, examined root causes of the current crisis, and today we will be looking at the way forward and principles for effective lay action. The crisis brought about by clerical sexual abuse, and particularly by Episcopal failures in responding adequately to that abuse, have left many asking, what can the laity do? This is, I hope you'll agree, an important question, and one that arises somewhat naturally when it is the credibility of the clergy that is at a low ebb. But if the credibility of the clergy has been one of the many casualties of this crisis, it is worth recalling who is hurt most by this loss of credibility. It is not, I would suggest, the bishops. As Pope Francis has reminded us in his letter last summer to the people of God, when one part suffers, all suffer with it, citing St. Paul. When our priests and bishops have failed us, when they have sinned, it has harmed not just the direct victims, but the whole church. Obviously, in the case of clerical sexual abuse, that harm is felt most acutely by those who have themselves been abused. But the harm radiates outward from there to the families and communities of survivors, and eventually to the whole church. The recent case of Theodore McCarrick demonstrates perfectly the way this contagion of sin works. Discrete acts, many of which happened long, long ago, can spread and expand until millions of souls are made to bear the weight of the consequences of even just one man's sin. How much damage to the church one man, even one sin, can do. Sin, all sin, our sin, contaminates far more than the sinner. And we are deluding ourselves, we lay people, if we think that this is true for the Theodore McCarricks of the world, but not for ourselves. And what chance have we against such an indomitable opponent as sin? None, frankly. But that's precisely why we celebrate the mysteries of this Easter octave with such joy. It's not our victory to win. It's not a victory we are able to win. But we have a Savior who wins the victory for us. I speak this way not to sneak in a homily before turning over the podium to Archbishop Vigneron. I mention it because there is good in remembering that there's a certain futility built into our efforts to fix what is broken. We cannot fix the church by our own efforts, but we can, like Simon of Cyrene, perhaps do our part to carry some small part of the weight. And so we look today for principles to guide lay action in this moment of crisis, not in order to wrest authority or control from those to whom it has been given, but precisely as part of the work of restoring the credibility of that authority and the efficacy of the mission of the one from whom that authority comes. After all, it is an authority given by God, not to be lorded over one another, but so that it might be used in service to the faithful for the glory of God and the salvation of souls. And for that, we should be grateful. Before I introduce our first speaker, please allow me to thank a few people who need to be thanked. Today's conference would not have been possible without the hard work and efforts of the folks at the Institute for Human Ecology here at Catholic University. Special thanks goes to Stephen Higgins, Joe Capizzi, Sister Nancy Bauer, Angela Knoble, Matthew Balin, and Beatriz Lopez Bonetti. Special thanks also to Carla Lozoya, our Executive Director for University Communications, who's been especially helpful in the preparation of this conference and in getting the Catholic Project up and running. Thank you also to all of our event staff here at Catholic U who have helped put this together. Now, it's my great pleasure to start off our conference, Archbishop Allen Vigneron, the Archbishop of Detroit. Archbishop Vigneron was born in Mount Clemens, Michigan, on the shores of Lake St. Clair. That's north of Canada, if you know your maps well.
We're very proud of that.
He studied in Detroit and Rome and was ordained to the priesthood for the Archdiocese of Detroit in July of 1975. In 1979, then Father Vigneron began graduate studies in the School of Philosophy here at the Catholic University of America. He earned his master's in philosophy in 1983 and his PhD in May of 1987 with a dissertation on the German philosopher Edmund Husserl, the father of phenomenology. I believe you studied under Monsignor Sokolowski, is that correct? The phenomenology will come through in his remarks, I suspect. In 1996, he was named Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Detroit. He received his episcopal ordination from Cardinal Adam Maida, Archbishop of Detroit, on July 9th of that year. In 2003, he was named Coadjutor Bishop of Oakland, California, and succeeded to that see in October of that year. In 2009, he was appointed Archbishop of Detroit by Pope Benedict XVI. I want to mention now also that in 2016, as the culmination of years of prayer and preparation across his archdiocese, the local Church of Detroit met in a synod together, clergy and laity alike, to prayerfully consider how to become, as Archbishop Vigneron is fond of saying, a joyful band of missionary disciples. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Archbishop Allen Vigneron of Detroit.
Thank you, Mr. White, and I don't mind you sneaking a homily in because this is about lay clergy cooperation, and so we can do that together. And I'm very glad to be back home at the Catholic University today. Very grateful to President Garvey for this invitation. As I understand it, our common task today is to spend some time thinking together in order to identify principles for action by the laity that can effectively assist the Church in dealing with the challenges that come to us from this second phase of the sex abuse crisis. Put simply, we want to work toward a solid answer to the question, what can lay people do to help? The particular contribution I've been invited to make to this effort is to recount and to reflect on in this first session my experience of leading the Archdiocese of Detroit in our response to the crisis since it has erupted. To stimulate my thinking on this topic, the organizers for our gathering suggested that in my remarks I have it in mind to respond to questions such as, what have my efforts been to restore trust in church leadership? And how have I sought to include the laity in efforts to renew the church? I hope then that in what follows I have, from my experience, addressed strategic issues about the collaboration of bishops, other clergy, and the laity to deal with the current crisis, as we seek to resolve the problems and heal the wounds in such a way that trust is restored and the church is renewed. As the second part of these introductory remarks, I want to outline the road I will take so that my report of my experience as a bishop will get us to our goal, namely the goal of identifying principles for the actions we take together in order to respond to our current crisis. I have structured the body of my talk to fall into two parts. The first is a narrative with some initial observations on my experience of leading the Archdiocese of Detroit since the publication of the Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report and the news of the moral failures of former Cardinal McCarrick. The second part offers a more sustained reflection on that experience, what I might call a distillation of the judgments I have made in order to articulate the sense of my experiences. And by sense, I mean the truths about sound moral action that have been disclosed to me as I have reflected on my experience. I offer here an observation about the rationale for this approach. It seems to me that these two halves of narration and reflection are an essential duo, neither of which could stand alone, since the pairing of experience and judgment is not by mere happenstance, but comes from the very nature of how we let the states of affairs that unfold in the world manifest themselves to us. We let events unfold for us as we live through them, while at the same time actively categorizing them into coherent parts and wholes. As a final observation on what I've referred to as the section on reflections on my experience, I want to affirm that I have aimed at being guided in these reflections by the more basic truths of both natural and revealed wisdom about sound ethical action, the sound ethical action of those charged with leading the Church of God. I will say more about this below, but for now I am telegraphing to you my conviction that the identification of principles for clergy lay leadership, that any identification of that leadership which does not take into account the supernatural identity of the Church falls short of the goal we are aiming at today. So the first part, narrative about my experience. In thinking back to those first days of the renewed crisis, I would characterize my aims as including these objectives. 1, to answer questions from my community about how my predecessors and I have dealt with the problems brought into the light by the report and by the news. 2, to respond to concerns about new issues that presented themselves. 3, to assess the policies and procedures in place to deal with the issues that emerged in the wake of the report and the news. And 4, to communicate clearly and effectively with my community about what has been done and will be done to address the crisis. That is to say, to give an accounting of my stewardship of our local church. From the first, it was clear to me that I could not achieve these aims by acting alone. To be sure, there were many voices loudly insisting that past failures demanded that we bishops include the laity to actively address the challenges uncovered by the crisis. But there's a much firmer basis for such. The rightness of this course of lay-clergy cooperation is, I believe, principally grounded on the very nature of things. In order to act well, I recognize that I am in need of what I might call co-agents, others to help me by thinking and acting along with me. In our local church, these co-agents fell into several sets. The first was a set of clergy and laity who brought particular competencies to our deliberations about how to respond to the crisis. These competencies included diocesan leadership, direction of priest personnel, canon law, civil law, communications, and an experienced jurist accomplished over the long haul in discerning how to advance the common good within our civil society. We've called this set of people simply the group. Nothing really very creative about it, but we know what we mean when we say the group has to get together. Since the beginning of the crisis, I have been meeting with them frequently to hear their assessment of where things stand and what actions ought to be taken. The second set of co-agents is made up of the consultative bodies that are a stable part of the life of our local church. Of course, some of these are specifically clerical, such as the Presbyteral Council and the College of Consultors. Others, such as our Pastoral Council and our Finance Council, are principally lay, the very character that is the specific focus of our meeting today. In the wake of the crisis, I have engaged in ongoing consultation with them to hear their advice on how better to respond, both at the level of action to be taken and communications about action. A third set of co-agents upon whom I have relied in my duties as a pastoral leader is quite heterogeneous. It includes the ordinary parishioners of my diocese who have offered to me their counsel about actions that they see need to be taken in response to the crisis. In addition to their thinking, I am indebted to their praying. Without that, we would not have had the virtue to act well. In addition to the members of my own diocese, I would mention lay groups and individuals from outside the Archdiocese whose insights about what went wrong and actions that will address these mistakes have been invaluable in shaping the exercise of my own leadership. A particular subset of this group that deserves mention is made up of the laity who serve in the U.S. Bishops' Conference. As a bishop, I am deeply indebted to them for their contribution to my decision-making. At this point, I want to acknowledge those members of the laity who had no choice in regards to their participation in this crisis, namely the victim survivors. Those with whom I have spoken have provided a unique and painful perspective about the enormity of the sins perpetrated against the innocents. I listen, I learn. Sometimes I hear of healing and continued commitment to the church. Sometimes I hear of incredible anger and disappointment, especially from those victim survivors who have been driven away from the sacraments for the rest of their lives. These encounters never stop informing and animating my response to the current crisis. A further set of co-agents I would mention include men and women who, though they are not members of the church, have offered insights about how to respond wisely to the current crisis. They are good neighbors to the Catholic community, and their contribution to me and my leadership ought not go unacknowledged. In sum, I can affirm unambiguously that my pastoral leadership of the Archdiocese of Detroit during this crisis would not have been possible without the collaboration of the laity. Oh, I've offered an accounting or a recounting of my experience of these last months, but to help shed light on my own positive experience of lay collaboration over these last months, I think it would be helpful to make reference to the wider context in which I have had lay co-agents. I will briefly mention what have been for me the three most significant. First, the Review Board of the Archdiocese. In dealing with cases of clergy who have sexually abused minors, I would find it impossible to act wisely without the assistance of the Review Board. I am deeply grateful for the various competencies the members of the board bring to their work. Most importantly, their consistent insistence to fully participate in the criminal process, from reporting to law enforcement to cooperating fully with investigators. I feel that my fine experience of this collaboration has led me to be confident of lay co-agents in dealing with the current crisis and shaped me to be able to make good use of their contributions. Second, the Finance Council of my Archdiocese. Like all diocesan bishops, I have the help of the Finance Council that is required according to canon law. In my personal experience, the assistance of the council in our diocese has been absolutely indispensable. When I arrived in Detroit in January of 2019, no, that can't be right, 2013, our region was suffering, that's a typo, I make those. When I arrived in Detroit in January of 2013, our region was suffering badly from an economic downturn. The consequences of this for the local church were grave. The only way I saw to respond was being transparent with the council members about the situation and inviting their best advice about how to respond in a way that respected the specific mission of the church, the dimension of the matter about which I was more competent. Without the wise advice of the council, I would not have been able to endorse the course that enabled us to avert financial disaster. Here too, I feel that this excellent experience of lay clergy collaboration has served to give me confidence about the need to have lay co-agents in responding to the current crisis. Third, as Mr. Smith mentioned, the Archdiocese and Synod of 2016. After almost 3 years of preparation, in November of 2016, the Archdiocese of Detroit celebrated a synod dedicated to fashioning our local church's response to the call for the new evangelization. The results of the synod process were clearly an epical gift of the Holy Spirit, nothing less than the new Pentecost we had prayed for. The fact that the majority of members at the synod were lay has served to fix in my mind and heart the conviction about the necessity of lay co-agents for the flourishing of the life of the church, a conviction that gave shape to my way of dealing with the current sex abuse crisis. So you asked about my experiences. I offered a narrative of that. Now about my reflection. Having reported on my experience of having lay co-agents in an effort to move us along the path toward the goal of our conference, I will now articulate some principles that I brought to and have found confirmed by my experience as I have narrated it to you. First, because the church is a grace, co-agency requires not only competence, but faith. A foundational principle for our collaboration is the truth that the church is a mystery of divine grace. She is an organic reality that is at once divine and human. This means that the dynamic of the interplay of nature and grace expressed in the axiom, "Grace builds on nature and perfects it," must animate all clergy-lay collaboration. An approach to our collaboration that fails to take this fact into account will not achieve the true good of the Church. A second principle: because the people of God is a hierarchical communion, co-agency is normal. As a hierarchical communion, the Church is a sacrament of the Holy Trinity. That is, she is a unity of an ordered many. This principle, to which the Second Vatican Council's dogmatic constitution on the Church, Lumen Gentium, testifies, discloses the graced foundation for the cooperation of clergy and laity in confronting the crisis of sexual abuse. It is because we, God's people, are a communion that each of us is called upon to make his or her proper contribution to our acting together for our common end. As a consequence, the co-agency of clergy and laity today is not anomalous, but most proper. From my own experience as a bishop and all the dimensions I reported earlier, I can attest to the efficacy of this collaboration. 3, because each local church is governed by a member of the hierarchy, the bishop is finally responsible for determining the course of actions to be taken in the name of his diocese. This principle is, like the one I just considered, grounded on the nature of the Church as a hierarchical communion. Here, the emphasis is on the hierarchical pole. Specifically, we are acknowledging the fact that the paradigm is for each local church to be entrusted to the stewardship of one member of the Episcopal College. In this way, the monarchy of the Father within the Holy Trinity is manifested in the bishop, serving as the ultimate one principle, one arche, for action in his church. It is the final determination of the bishop that secures the stable basis for consistent acting. And no healthy approach to lay clergy collaboration can contradict this aspect of Christ's constitution of his church. I would offer 2 further complementary explanations for why we need to observe this third principle. First, because any actions taken to respond to the challenge of the current crisis are parts of a greater whole. That whole is the complex web of ecclesial acts that lead to the salvation of souls. It is the particular competence of the diocesan bishop to be the trustee of this common good and to ensure that all the particular ecclesial acts, including acts of healing in response to this crisis, that all particular ecclesial acts contribute to this end. Second, because the acts of ecclesial life, if they are to be authentic, must contribute to transmitting the self-gift of God we call divine revelation. According to the Constitution Dei Verbum of the Second Vatican Council, what was handed on, this is the quote, what was handed on by the apostles includes everything which contributes toward the holiness of life and increase in faith of the people of God. And so the Church, in her teaching, life, and worship, perpetuates and hands on to all generations all that she herself is, all that she believes. End of quote from number 8. It belongs to the bishops of the church to determine finally which ecclesial acts do qualify as faithfully transmitting the revelation and which acts do not. Therefore, it belongs to the diocesan bishop to determine finally which courses of action to be taken in response to the sexual abuse crisis are authentic vehicles for handing on God's saving words and deeds. A fourth principle: because of the nature of acting, consultation, even if not determinative, is of indispensable value. To establish the truth of this principle, I want to recapitulate the wisdom we have inherited about the very nature of acting, about what it is for acting to be acting, and not just any sort of motion. Acting is a form of thinking. That form of thinking, that specific form of thinking, we call practical judging. To act is to see what within the current state of affairs is doable, and to recognize which of the possible courses of action will lead to the good that is willed. Once these insights are attained, acting commences. This look at the nature of acting discloses the worth of consultation. Now, I recognize that in our democratic society, the worth of voices that enter into deliberation without the power finally to determine how best to bring that deliberation to a conclusion is often characterized as mere consultation. It is deprecated as being powerless. But it is my experience that it is not powerless. The voices that offer insight, that help form the final judgment about what ought to be done, are very powerful. Theirs is the power of truth. A fifth principle: the natural norms for a healthy team apply. Because the church is a human reality as well as divine, the norms that apply to any naturally healthy team apply to the group of clergy and laity that are co-agents in acting to respond to the current sexual abuse crisis. Such standards include the necessity of each member being competent. Second, the dynamics of the group have to be healthy. This includes the need for the members to be directed to the same end, to be honest and trusting with one another, respectful in their interactions, and loyal in supporting the course of action that is settled as the result of their deliberations. And of course, the team must be attentive to care for the good of each member. A sixth principle: praying is an indispensable part of collaborative action. To pray is to act. And in the life of the church, acting without praying is a phantom, a sort of pale ghost of authentic action. This is the case because the church, if she is true to her nature, always acts in reaction to the initiative of the Lord. The church must listen before acting. So if the clergy and the lay faithful are to be co-agents in healthy integral decision-making, they must pray and pray together. And a seventh final principle: collaborative acts must be acts of abandonment. The corporate acts of the church as the church ought to conform to the foundational act of Christ. That is, his passing over from death to life in abandonment to the Father's will. Clergy and laity, in thinking about what will help the church respond to the current sex abuse crisis, cannot fail to ask how the courses of action under consideration reflect the act of faith in the power of the cross. This means that what we do together must reflect the virtues of repentance, conversion, and abandonment into the hands of God's providence. In coming back to Catholic University today, I've been reflecting on the fact that this very gathering itself is a model of laity and clergy working together to resolve the current sex abuse crisis. I hope in my remarks I've done my fair share of being co-agent with you. I hope that my remarks are a useful contribution to what is a common effort. I look forward to how you, my co-agents, will assist me in fulfilling my responsibilities as the Archbishop of Detroit. Thank you.
We have a microphone. Raise your hand. We have time for a couple of questions. Please ask your question in the form of a question. Be brief and identify yourself as you ask the question.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Charles Molyneux. I am unaffiliated with any organization. I'm a graduate of Catholic and also Jesuit schools. There is out there, as you alluded, Excellency, a certain amount of righteous anger. That's a term that Bishop Chaput has used. As a result of the anger and a result of the second phase of the crisis, Catholics are divided into three parts, you might say. First of all, there's a large group of Catholics who have simply left. This is in the millions. Secondly, we have the apathetic Catholics who sit there on Sunday mornings, they read their diocesan paper, which gives them a little bit of local Catholic news. And there's a third group of Catholics, that's us, who are somewhat informed, and we're partly waiting to see what happens next. And what do we get from the Vatican, from Rome? We hear about global warming. We hear about the possibility of women deacons. And as to the rest, as to the crisis, there's a stall. In basketball, it's called freezing the ball. Let's consider a little bit of history. There was a Catholic initiative back in the 1970s, National Organization of Catholic Men, and that folded. Then in the 1990s, there was a lay initiative called the Catholic Campaign for America, and that folded. It got no support from the bishops, with the exceptions perhaps of Cardinal O'Connor and Bishop Gracida. I can't think of any others. Then in the late 1990s, there was the Catholic Alliance of the Christian Coalition. That was attacked by the bishops as being divisive right out of the gate.
A question, please, Mr. Molyneux.
I'm coming to the question. Now, in the second phase of the crisis, we have Voice of the Faithful, a lay initiative coming out of Boston, and the reaction of the episcopacy was to say, no meetings on Catholic property. From the other end of the spectrum, Tradition, Family, and Property, we had a book that said, well, we have weathered other storms. Well, we know the church will survive. We know we're going to weather the storms. My question to you is, and I asked this question at the last conference, where is the lay leadership going to come from? Is it going to come from the academics, the independent writers, the Chancery employees. What's your thought on that?
Number of points. First of all, I'm not sure I agree with your threefold division of the laity. About the group who have left, I would say there's two dynamics there that are at work. The natural dynamic, the more all-encompassing dynamic of the secularization of our culture is intensified by the current crisis, but I think we have to understand it within that. I also think that you have to be a little more careful about the people who are not upset today. I don't know that it is always apathy or being uninformed, but there's a whole range of the way people are responding to the current situation, as I have found it in my diocese. Now, to the specific point about lay leadership, I would make a distinction between the lay leadership that seeks for political change and the lay leadership that is cooperating with the pastors about the direction of the church. And I think it's very important for us bishops not to take over the preeminence of the lay leadership that is involved in specifically political action to shape the civil order. That's one point. Also, you spoke about lay groups. I think it's very important for the lay groups that we bishops cooperate with to begin with the convictions that are based on the faith of the church. I know certain lay groups that, as you look at their foundational documents, are not endorsing the elements of the constitution of the church that are essential for healthy action forward. I would say that makes the whole point of one of the points of my talk was we're not going to get useful action unless we're all based on the revelation. And the third point is I think we should listen to any wise counsel we're given and try to incorporate it. I think that's just the way any wise person would act. Those are some comments on your comments. And then the last thing, I think for my responsibility as a bishop, I have a care for my particular church, and I need to do everything I can that helps me advance the life of the church. And I feel that according to the teachings of the church, especially Lumen Gentium, I have a wide scope for what I can accomplish.
Good morning, Archbishop. My name is Mike Costu, and I am unaffiliated. I'm a humble parishioner of the Holy Family Catholic Church in the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia. Recently, I wrote my pastor to request that we convene a meeting or discussion within the parish to pray for victims, and to generally show solidarity for them, to provide a platform for us to support one another, to agree on a common purpose, in light of events, and lastly, yes, to call for, appropriate accountability for bishops. Here I had in mind, providing a voice that would somehow advance, the USCCB from the meeting that was sort of halted, at the end of last year. My question, I haven't heard a response from my pastor. I am in an active dialogue with the parochial vicar who has offered support. What advice would you provide me, under the circumstances, and how would you advise the pastor to respond to my request?
My suggestion for you would be to make another initiative to the pastor, to see a meeting, something to find out what his thoughts are about that. I think you have an appropriate forum to present the matter to the bishop and ask his advice. It's a little awkward for me, not being the Bishop of Arlington, to engage with the life of that diocese, but fair enough for you to ask me my advice. It is that you try again with the pastor. I would try again with the try with the bishop. And if after you give it a reasonable amount of time, you feel that you've exhausted what fraternally is useful, I would say begin your own initiatives, as long as you have that freedom to gather people together in prayer, and see what happens as you come together for the kind of prayer and in discussion that you have in mind is useful. And as long as you do that in a spirit of communion and respect, I think that's a great contribution, and I would see what the Holy Spirit will bring out of your impulse, your initiative.